Again, welcome to our final live session for the month of February. I'm your host, Attorney Ify, here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I help clients nationwide with their immigration cases. So, if you're seeing me for the first time and you're not following me yet, make sure you hit that follow button and subscribe on YouTube so we can get to know one another and help each other on this journey here to getting your green card. All right, it is 2026. There are some challenges right now that immigrants are facing with getting their green card. So throughout this month, I went live and I addressed several topics, several conversations about getting your green card. All right, we talked about how to avoid delays. Yeah, that was one of the first things we discussed in the beginning of the year, because that's a number one question, how to avoid delays and how to prepare a package that gets approved. All right, you all already know that I've helped clients nationwide, hundreds of clients, with getting their family-based green card. Some of you all watching right now are my clients. Yay, thank you for being here, Laura, watching me on YouTube. Make sure you share this with your friends. Invite everyone who might be interested in knowing more about their green card process, how to get a green card, and how to avoid denials, okay? So today we're talking about denials. Let's talk about the top 3 reasons and how to fix it. In case you've been waiting for months and wondering if your case is going to end up in a denial, today you're going to get clarity on what to do next. All right. Keep in mind that a denial does not necessarily mean that you're done, like your immigration journey has ended. Okay. It could be a simple reason for denial, and that could be easily fixed. So just because you've been denied doesn't mean it's the end. All right. If it's missing evidence or maybe a wrong strategy because you filed something that you were not eligible for at the time, you just need to wait and refile. Okay, that can be fixed. Okay, and if it's some other legal issue that hasn't been addressed, like some misrepresentation in the past, right? You could certainly address that and find some resolution in your case. Okay, so the first reason why your green card may be denied is because you failed to respond to a request for evidence, right? Requests for evidence are very common in the immigration application journey, okay? It's not a denial, it's just simply the USCIS needing to know more before they make a final decision on your case, all right? So if you get a request for evidence and you don't respond in a timely manner, that could be one of the reasons why your green card would get denied, because they give you around 30 days on those notices to respond. And if you don't respond on time, that could just simply be a reason for a denial. Another reason could be that you responded, but you didn't give them the right information. So that's another thing too. So getting an RFE and not handling it properly is a top reason why people get denied. And I've seen it in my practice. It is easy to fix. However, once it has happened, it's going to create that delay and obviously tension within you because you never really know how that's going to go. Okay, so don't miss your deadline. Just make sure you're aware of when you need to actually submit the evidence, because it'll suck if you actually have the evidence and just didn't submit it, right? Because there's not going to be any extensions or reminders. It's just that one letter. Make sure you're tracking your mail and you know when the notice comes in and you can make a plan to respond. Otherwise, you get denied, okay? Common reasons why people will miss responding to their RFE is because they're scared for one, because they think that getting a request for evidence just means that they've done something wrong. So they panic, and then they can't find the documents that are requested. And, sometimes for good reason too, because if you're applying for a marriage-based green card, for example, and one of the evidence that you need is going to be from a spouse, and the spouse is not cooperating or just basically blocking you from getting that document, that could be a serious problem because you will get denied, right, if they don't receive the document. All right, some people don't really understand what the USCIS wants. I recently had a case with a lady who ended up sending information for a joint sponsor that she did not even need because she didn't really understand what the letter was saying. So she responded on time, but she just sent the wrong evidence and she still got denied. So now she's in my office and we're working to reopen her case. All right, so don't wait because you have to meet that deadline. There's no respond later, just at your own time. You have to meet the deadline. Otherwise, you're entering into dangerous territory there because a denial could mean removal proceedings, and you don't want that in 2026. So make sure you respond to any request from the government in a timely manner. And if you're not able to do that and you end up getting denied, there's a fix, right? That's why we're here today. I'm sharing with you the top 3 reasons why people get denied and how to fix it. Okay, so if you're not able to catch it on time, you're watching this live right now and you already got denied, the simple fix for this type of denial is to file a motion to reopen. Okay, this is an I-290B, which tells the government that you now have new evidence, right? Because you were denied for lack of evidence. So once you get that evidence, you can file to reopen. There's still a deadline for this, keep in mind, okay? File to reopen, show them the new evidence, and they could potentially reconsider your application, okay? It's not going to be automatic, and they're not going to remind you to do this. This is just what you have to understand. These are legal strategies that you have to understand if you're in that position. Okay, so if you don't know where to go and you got a denial right now, the best thing is to talk to an immigration attorney. Okay, I'm available to talk to clients starting in March because we're already at the end of the month, so I don't have any availabilities right now, but if you click the link in the comments, if you're on Facebook, YouTube, wherever you're watching from, you can click the link in the comments to see my next available time to talk with you about your RFE or your denial, because sometimes that 30 days really catches up quick and you end up in a situation, right? So if you're in that category, you can reach out to me ASAP. Let's talk about it. Okay. I mentioned a client earlier that I was telling you about who I ended up getting denied because she didn't respond correctly to her RFE. Okay, this client entered on a fiance visa, right? Got married, did everything the right way. Got married, applied for the permanent residency green card, and shortly after, when she received the RFE, for more information for the sponsor, she misunderstood that request and thought they were asking for a joint sponsor, right? And mind you, her spouse earns over $70,000. This is what I got to find out when we had the consultation. Okay, her spouse earns over $70,000. There's a family of 2. So if they had the right strategy and information, they'll understand that with that income and the family size, they didn't need a joint sponsor. Okay, so sending the wrong evidence, even though they responded on time, still ended up with a denial because they didn't need a joint sponsor. The information they asked for the US citizen was not provided, so ended up in the same situation, and here we are. But I'm glad they've connected with me now because we can go ahead and refile the case. Right, because since the 30 days has passed, since it got denied, 30 days has passed, so we cannot reopen the case anymore. We have to refile. So again, this is why you need an immigration attorney for the strategy that works for you. right? Because if you're watching YouTube right now, you're watching, trying to figure out how to respond to an RFE, and you watch this video, you come across this video when I'm talking about a motion to reopen, you might think that applies to you, but maybe not, because it really depends on why you got denied, how long ago it's been, and if you still have that option to reopen. Otherwise, you might just need to refile. Okay, this is where strategy becomes very important. Okay, so I'm looking in the comments for questions as we go along today, because we're talking about something very important. So if any questions come up to you, I'll be happy to answer while we're here. Otherwise, I have some questions at the end that people already asked from the Facebook group. I'm going to respond today. Okay, so very important for us to understand what the RFE is about, make sure we respond on time. And if it's too late, make sure you know what's available to you, what's next. Okay? So reason number 2, why people get denied. Top 3 reasons why your green card will get denied is because you cannot prove bona fide relationship. Okay? Sounds simple, but it is up there in the reasons, especially if you're applying for a marriage-based green card. Many couples get confused when they go to interviews, or just get requests for evidence, right, about their marriage, when they're like, my marriage is real, so why are they asking all these things? They really, get worried. I get calls about that all the time. And I try to explain to people that even though your marriage is real, your marriage is real, you and your spouse, you've talked and you're in this, right? The USCIS doesn't know what you guys have talked about in private. They only know what evidence you've submitted to prove your case. So if you're not able to show that you have shared residence, that you share your finances, and you actually have commingled life together, you most likely get denied, because they're not only just looking for that marriage certificate or a few pictures here and there. It has to tell a story. All right? Evidence is required to tell your story. So as much as you love each other, as much as you're building your life together, whatever you're doing in private, you have to let them know through evidence. And this is where an experienced professional comes in, because your case, your particular marriage, will need different kinds of evidence based on your circumstances, right? Every marriage is not the same. Every marriage is not going to survive with just a lease and maybe some life insurance or health insurance here and there. Some people, need a lot more because of the situation they're in. Like, for example, if one of you, meaning the non-immigrant, is in ICE detention, for example, that's going to affect how your evidence will look like. So a few pictures here and there will not cut it. Even proof of residence won't even be enough if you have a spouse in ICE detention and you're trying to get a green card. Or perhaps you had a spouse who entered without a visa. The evidence is going to be different for that, because you have more to prove here, that you're not just getting married just to avoid immigration consequences, that you're actually in love and you're building a future together. Okay? Some of the red flags that could make a couple that is real just look a little funny is, number 1, large age difference. Okay, if you have over 10 years of age gap, you most likely be getting an RFE or maybe just a straight denial, because they don't believe it's a real relationship. All right, so before you apply, make sure you understand what these red flags are that could affect you. Large age difference. quick marriage after entry, all right? No joint accounts, living separately. Those types of things could trigger a denial for lack of bona fide relationship. Okay? And if you had an interview and they ask you about your relationship and it's not consistent, that could also trigger a denial. So keep that in mind for those of you applying through marriage. All right, at this law firm, we help with family-based immigration, mostly marriage-based, but if you're a parent of a U.S. citizen or a child of a U.S. citizen under 21, you could apply while you're still in the U.S. So reach out. Let's talk about your options for getting your green card through your family. Okay? So let's talk about a case example that I have. A client, I actually have the notice of intent to deny. I don't know if I can share it during this live. I'll see. But I have a notice that I received for this client. This is an old case from 2022. Right, but I'm going to use this case as an example here because they almost got denied for lack of bona fide relationship, even though their marriage was very real. Like, and they had to see their wedding. It was huge. Right, they're Nigerian, so you know how Nigerians do their weddings. We don't play. So it was a huge wedding. They spent lots of money. They really have a genuine bond, but they still ended up in that situation where they almost got denied because the husband at the time that they were getting married and doing all these things had removal proceedings on his record. All right, so because he got picked up by ICE and because he married while in ICE custody, that affected the proof that was required. Okay, I really wish I could share what I have, but I'm not sure if I prepared it properly. Maybe the next time we have a live, we can share it because I don't want to share their private information here. Let me see. But they had a list of things. That's what I want to show you guys. They really had lots of evidence to prove the relationship, right? Letters from friends and family. They had tickets where they're traveling back and forth, seeing each other. What else? Tuition statement. That was huge, right? Because if you have joint finances, that's usually a huge indicator that your marriage is real. So this couple had all the typical stuff that you would see on YouTube, Facebook, if you're just searching, like, what do I need for my marriage-based green card? Right? You see this generic stuff. 50 pictures. 50? That's a lot of pictures. I don't even send that much because, 50 pictures, that's a lot. So, but they had it. So they sent the pictures and they really were able to show that it was genuine, but they still almost got denied until they worked with me to respond to that notice, just because the burden of proof was higher since the husband was facing deportation. That's really, what it was about. Once you're facing deportation, they think you're going to be desperate and you're going to just get married just to kind of avoid that deportation. That's really the logic here. Right? But obviously, that wasn't the case for them. They just needed someone to present that strategy, present the legal arguments that they did have a bona fide relationship and create the timeline. It was a lot during that period. And we had 30 days to respond. So we had to really come up with tight evidence that ended up proving that it was a real relationship, and they got approved. Right? He's still in removal proceedings. This is 3 years now. But the part that is necessary, the relief that is required for him to get out of removal proceedings was approved. So now all he has to do is present this to a judge now that it's already been approved. right? But removal proceedings can take years sometimes because they give you time waiting for your green card to get approved, waiting for this, waiting for that, before you can have your final hearing. And if you're lucky, maybe they might terminate your hearing out of court. So different options there, but you have to understand what works for your own unique situation and don't copy what everyone else is doing because you really do not know. Right? I've been seeing this story online on the internet about this man who recently got deported, and they're just sharing clips on Instagram. And naturally, I'm wondering, how did he get deported? He said he stayed in ICE detention for 10 months and then ended up being deported back to Nigeria. And I'm just like, you have a U.S. citizen spouse, you have a U.S. citizen child. I don't understand. Like, how did you end up being deported? But that's a prime example of you never really know. You don't know the full story of what this man, did or why he is inadmissible. Because I'm going to show you all in the final point that I have here that simply being married to a U.S. citizen alone is not going to be enough to protect you from deportation. All right? Because there is a chance that you as an individual may be inadmissible depending on what you did before you came to the U.S., how you entered the U.S., all that stuff. It matters. Okay, so if your documentation is weak, you're applying for a family-based green card and you got an RFE, or you just know that your documentation is weak, you need to use alternative evidence, right? Especially the timeline proof. That's what I used in this case I was telling you all about, to show in each circumstance, each birthday, each holiday, each vacation, just what was happening day to day. This is how we're able to build a narrative of the shared life, right? Because random pictures here and there with no story doesn't say anything. You can take pictures with anyone anytime, especially in this day and age, right, with your phone. So it has to tell a story. So timeline proof is going to be huge with your alternative evidence, right? Your statements. This couple had a lot of statements, but I believe the type of statements that they will want in this scenario where you've been in ICE is going to be more detailed than just a typical, affidavit of support saying this person is good. I know the couple, just the basics, right? That will work if you have other stronger evidence. But if you're struggling because you're in ICE or because you haven't been married too long, right, there's that. So there's several reasons why you might not have enough evidence and then get denied. So build stronger records. Contact me if you need help doing that. I thrive in marriage-based cases, right? Because I'm just focused on families, getting families together. All right. And if your spouse becomes abusive and disappears, and that's why you are not able to provide evidence, right, you may qualify for a VAWA self-petition, right? That's one of the benefits I like to talk about because many immigrants don't know that it exists. So they end up staying in abusive relationships with people who are not interested in helping you move your life forward, essentially. So if your spouse is holding you back by holding back evidence, especially financial records, that's very common, right? You may qualify to self-petition, and even though you still need to prove that it was a real relationship, the evidence will be different. Again, case by case basis. So don't get a generic checklist on Google and expect that will work for you perfectly. Okay. On my Facebook group, we talk about different evidence that you can use. We also talk about self-petition and just different options for immigrants, but still, those are general conversations that don't always apply to you. So make sure that you understand your own scenarios with everything that we discuss in the group, everything that I share live. Right, I'll make sure that you understand that, and yeah, prepare a case that wins. Okay. And again, my number's on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. My number's on the screen if you are on the Facebook group. I've shared my link in the chat. So if you want to speak with me, Chibuike, go ahead and click that link and we can chat one-on-one after this. Okay? All right, here's one example for someone who came to me and ended up, now he has his green card. Okay, he came to me to file his VAWA self-petition. Interestingly, in my career, I've had several male VAWA clients. Typically with male clients, or just in a marriage, typically, right? When it comes to physical abuse, you might think that only applies to the woman in the relationship. Most men don't talk about abuse. That's why we don't realize. And then it's just more common to see women as victims. But unfortunately, in my career, I've seen several men who were victims of abuse, right? Just by reason of the spouse not cooperating in the application process or controlling the finances, right? I just talked to a young man the other day. We haven't started his case yet because I think now he's in removal, actually, just because he didn't know the different options here. But he had a marriage-based green card, and the spouse sent a letter to USCIS twice to get him denied, basically, just claiming different random things. But it was a control tactic. They're sending emails to USCIS anytime they have a fight, like threatening with deportation. Those are control tactics, but he didn't realize that. So he just kind of was going with the flow, trying to make her, happy, whatever, was just giving her money. But now he's in removal. So he came to me and I'm like, bro, you really should have filed a self-petition and held your case in abeyance instead of allowing this woman to basically mess with your future, for lack of a better word, because all those letters that she was sending, knowing that it was a lie, was just to get him to fall in line, and it worked because she ended up with a house, ended up with a lot of his money, and he ended up homeless. Right? So it's unfortunate as immigrants that we experience these things and just be at the mercy of people. Okay. But if you're hearing me right now, if you're watching this is certainly needed for you. So you need to tap in, make sure that you are free from abusive relationships so you can pursue your own dreams and your own goals. All right. So that's what happened there with this client. He got approved. I've had a few others approved, but there's this one particular client I thought of for today. Okay. So let's talk about the final reason so we can get into the questions. I'm seeing some things pop up now. People are asking questions. So we'll get into that and also the questions I had saved. Today's session is going to be a little bit over 30 minutes, but that's okay because I hope that you all are getting some value from this conversation today. Okay. All right. Okay, so number 3, inadmissibility. That's the more complex reason why your green card gets denied. Okay, the first 2 that I mentioned are easy to fix. Okay, all right, you can do motion to reopen, provide more evidence, or do a self-petition. All right, those are your fixes. But if you've been found inadmissible, right, meaning that you essentially did something, like you, the applicant, you, the non-citizen, you, the immigrant, did something that prevents you from qualifying. Okay, it's usually criminal convictions, right? Fraud, misrepresentation on your application. It doesn't have to be this one. It could be any other immigration application that you ever filed. Right? Prior deportations, right? That could certainly affect your admissibility. I think I had a question about that today. All right, if you've been deported before, meaning you've been in removal proceedings, it's going to be important to know why you were deported, how long you've been out of the country, right? Because sometimes there's a chance to come back, but in your initial application, all of these things are going to come up. False claim to citizenship, ooh, that's a big one, because you could totally get banned from getting a green card ever with that one. So need to be careful about that. So being banned is worse than getting denied, because denials, again, is not the end of the world, right? It can always be fixed. But false claim to citizenship, you're done. Okay, quite frankly. So again, family-based immigration, the way to fix potential inadmissibility is through the I-601 waiver. Okay, I-601 waiver is only available in family-based cases, for one. And then for two, there are different types of waivers. So this is where having professional guidance with this type of application is highly, highly recommended. Okay, this is not a DIY type filing, because you have to prove extreme hardship to your US citizen relative and also argue that if you were deported, your spouse will certainly be affected, right? So just missing you alone, or maybe they won't get to see you, is not going to be enough extreme hardship. It has to be extreme. That your argument will show that you should be forgiven because this one inadmissibility, let's just say it was a misrepresentation, right? This is not significant. If it was something you just said verbally, you didn't really provide false documentation type stuff, you just have to make that argument. Okay, certainly not a DIY type thing. So if you're one of those who thinks that immigration is just all about forms and you can do it yourself, don't get caught in this trap right here. The trap of inadmissibility, where you get denied and your options are less. Okay, so don't get caught in it. If you find yourself in removal already because you got denied, certainly just reach out to a lawyer at that point, because now your options are different. Okay? Give me a thumbs up if you're still with me, you're still getting some value, because we're at the end right now. We're getting towards the end, and I can start answering your questions. So if you're still here getting some value, give me a thumbs up. Love to participate, communicate with you all. Okay. So a few final points here. If you don't have strategy, your chances of getting a denial is going to be high. That's just a given. Okay, because you filed a loan, you went off of your own relationship, you didn't evaluate any future roadblocks. Okay, if you've joined my other webinars I've had in the past, I told you all about the easy method that I use to make sure that my clients don't fall into traps in the future. Okay, because with the easy method, you're going to start with examining your immigration history. And that's a strategy that many people really just ignore, because they think, yes, I'm married to a citizen and I haven't done anything wrong, so I'm just going to go ahead and apply for the green card. And that's all well and good. You may get to a certain point with that strategy, but if you don't examine your history and you get blindsided at an interview, that will be a real problem. Okay? So I want you all today to commit to starting your immigration process with professional guidance. Don't file anything until you've talked to a professional to avoid any potential denials in your future. Because while your history may be clean, from what you know, there might be something hidden somewhere that you just completely forgot about or didn't think it was a big deal. Right? Maybe you got arrested at one point and it got expunged or dismissed, whatever. You're just like, yeah, I didn't go to jail and, I'm good. You may be wrong. So just get a first opinion before you actually file anything. That will be your first strategy. Okay, and if we're going with the easy method, if you contact me, if you reach out to me, I'm going to take you through that step. We're going to examine your history, and then I'm going to tell you what types of documents that you need for your specific history, your specific situation. Right? Some of them you might not need right away. Some you might need in the future. Like, for example, if I realize that you need a waiver because you misrepresented on a visa before, like a visa application in the past, right? I'm going to give you the strategy and documents right now, but you actually cannot file the waiver until you've actually gotten a denial. But you're going to be aware of what you need in the beginning, okay? So there's no delays when the time comes, because we already know this is going to happen because X, Y, Z. So that's how you save yourself problems in the beginning and make sure you're on the right track to getting your approval. Okay? So in March, which is going to be in a few days, how cool. February kind of went by pretty quickly. We're going to focus on accepting cases requiring motions to reopen. So this is for people who have been denied already. We're going to focus on you all in March. And then we're going to also focus on marriage-based green cards and VAWA self-petitions, right? Because again, they go hand in hand, because one is when the marriage is good, and then the second one is when the marriage is not good. So if you're married to a citizen and things are not going well, you haven't filed your green card, you feel stuck, a self-petition may be a better option here. So book a call with me. Let's talk about how to get out of a complicated relationship and get your green card. We're also going to accept cases for I-601 waivers. In the last live session, I talked about I-601 waivers and how there are two different types. Actually, I'll say three different types, because one would be for your medical waiver, right? So you could be inadmissible if you haven't had the necessary vaccines required, or you have some type of communicable disease. You could be found inadmissible for in that instance. So there's an I-601 for medical waiver, and then there's an I-601 for criminal convictions or misrepresentation. So that's the two types. Then the third kind of I-601A version is for those who have unlawful presence. So it's all the same effect, waiving your inadmissibility, but they have different forms for different types of inadmissibilities. That makes sense? This is why you need a professional, because even myself as an attorney, I'm learning every day, getting acquainted with all the different changes and requirements just to make sure my clients are on track. So doing this as a lawyer where I have many cases to work on is still a challenge. So imagine doing it by yourself, where you just have your own case to work on, no point of reference, just nothing else to help you there. And if you end up in a situation getting denied, right, you're still on your own. So join us so you can have support if you get an RFE, if you end up getting denied, or your spouse is acting up. We can help you get out of those situations. Okay? So book a strategy call with me. Link is in the comments, wherever you're watching me from right now. It's a 30-minute call. We do it online, and I'm going to go over the best strategy that works for you. Okay? So that's the final reason why your green card could get denied. And at this point, I'm going to get into the questions that we may have about green card denials, getting your green card in 2026, and how to fix any potential denial. Okay? Great. I'm going to scroll here, see if there are any questions that I missed while we're talking. I think I just saw one person saying they wanted to talk to me. So if you want to talk to me privately, you can book a call. But if you want to ask a question during this live, you can go ahead and do so now. We have a few more minutes just to wrap up today. It's been a fun time talking with you all. And starting in March, next month, I'm not sure the exact dates, but next Friday, we're going to do this again, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Answer your immigration questions and let you know how to move forward depending on what stage you're at. Okay? All right, so there's a question I have here that we can get into. This is about potentially missing a deadline. Ooh, that's tricky. So let's see. What happens if I file my I-751 late? Will I be put into deportation proceedings immediately? Great question from the group. Thank you very much. A short answer is no. You will not be placed into removal proceedings immediately. If you miss a deadline, that's certainly a problem, but it can be fixed by timely filing the removal of conditions, because that's what an I-751 is, right? If you want your 10-year green card after you've been married to your spouse for 2+ years and now it's time for your 10-year green card, you have to file that. So if you don't file it, certainly you could lose your status for sure, but you're not going to get placed in deportations immediately, okay? It is a process. People won't just come to your house and pick you up without the proceedings, right? So avoid getting a notice to appear in court because that will certainly make your case more complex. Right, avoid that. But if you just realize that you missed the deadline by a few weeks, a few months, go ahead and file now to remove conditions on your green card. Okay? Thank you for that great question. I'm going to move on to the next question I have here, which is also about removal of conditions. All right. We're about to remove conditions on my spouse's green card, but I want a divorce. Will he get a green card? Ooh, this sounds like it's coming from the US citizen here. And I totally understand because when it comes to getting your 10-year green card, there's that requirement that you are still married to your spouse and that everything is still bona fide. And there's no fraud. That's really why they put the requirement there. So if you're the US citizen asking about a divorce, really the short answer is he will still get his green card because there is an I-751 waiver that would apply here, right? It could be a divorce waiver or an abuse waiver, depending on the reason why the spouse cannot participate. That's the US citizen spouse, cannot participate in this process. Okay, so if the US citizen spouse, or if you're just getting a divorce, right, or the spouse is not cooperating, they've ghosted you, you can certainly file a waiver and still get your green card. So, short answer, if you divorce in the process of removing conditions, you can still get your green card if you apply for a waiver. Okay? I hope that's clear for you. Thank you again for that question. If I see any of the questions coming in live, I will answer those. Williams, thank you for being here. Patel, thank you for being here. Singh, I see you all the time. Thank you for being here as well. Feel free to ask your questions again in the chats so I can get to those before we wrap up today. Okay? All right, here's another question about, deportation. Okay, so this person says, I have an old voluntary departure on my records. This is from 10 years ago. Can I still apply for a green card through my new U.S. citizen spouse? All right, great question there for participating in this. Thank you. So, short answer is yes, you can still get your green card through your new U.S. citizen spouse. However, there are some complications when you have been deported, whether it was by voluntary departure, like you said, or just by a removal order. Okay, I'm glad that you mentioned the 10 years because there's usually a requirement for a certain amount of time to pass before the spouse can apply to re-enter. So you can certainly get your green card through your spouse, but you need an attorney for this one. Anyone who is in ICE deportation proceedings, ICE custody, just anything to do with removal, you need an attorney to file your relief in court because now your options are just less just because you are in removal. I mean, it's just what it is, right? Because removal means you are not eligible for a green card. That's why you even ended up there in the first place. So you certainly have to address that, make sure you are now admissible before you apply. Okay? Great question, though. I'm glad you brought that up so we can talk about it today. Oh yeah, so I'm going to move on to the next question. I see someone else saying hello, Attorney Ify, in the chat. What is that about? Let me see. Okay, this is from, how do I say your name? Jashanti? Jashanti, how are you? Okay, Jashanti says, I want to know if the interview is scheduled and if my husband has to go to jail, should I still go to the interview alone? Ooh, Jashanti, are you the U.S. citizen or the non-citizen in this situation? Great question. And thank you for bringing that up. Because if this is a marriage green card situation and you are not the citizen, you certainly cannot go for that interview on your own. If your spouse is going to go to jail, you need to call to reschedule. I've seen one instance where someone went alone, but the spouse was in active military duty. They were deployed. So that was a different scenario. But if your spouse is going to jail, it's actually even going to be important to know why he's even going to jail, right? So, because maybe you might need to do a self-petition here. Okay? Okay, Dushanti, I said it correctly. Great. Thank you. So if your spouse is going to jail and cannot attend the green card interview, you should certainly reschedule that interview because you cannot do a marriage-based interview on your own. Okay? You need your spouse there. But great question, Jashanti. If you're seeing me for the first time, I'm Attorney Ify, the attorney in the group, and you can send me a DM or reach out to me for a one-on-one conversation about what to do about your interview. Okay? Your interview is the last stage of your green card process, and what happens at that interview is very important to determine if you're going to get approved or denied. So not having your spouse with you is going to be a red flag. It's going to raise questions and could lead to a denial if you're not careful. Okay? So I hope that you reach out. Let's have a conversation. I have a special offer for members of the group, right? Those who are watching right now can take advantage of that to book a call with me for next week, right? Okay, let's see what other questions I have. I think I have one more question or maybe two more. We'll get into that and then we'll call it a day. It's Friday, guys. It's Friday and there's a lot going on that I want to get into. So, yay. Okay, next question. It says, can I still sponsor my spouse for a green card if I lost my job and I don't meet the income requirements? Okay, love this type of question because it allows us to talk about the income requirements for getting a green card. All right, those of you who have already started the process, you know by now that proof of relationship is not the only thing that you need when you are applying for a marriage-based green card. Okay, the government wants to know if the US citizen has enough income to support the non-citizen until they get their green card and become US citizens. So it's very important that the spouse, the US citizen spouse, be earning the correct income. So in this case, if your spouse lost their job and they don't meet the income requirement, the best solution for you is really getting a joint sponsor to support this application so that you can still apply now instead of waiting for your spouse to get a job. Okay? That would be the best solution right now. Even though you can potentially use assets to show income, like a house, property, things like that, the easiest way is going to be a joint sponsor because assets are very tricky to calculate. Okay, and you don't want to do that back and forth, RFE here, this and that. They could just deny it just simply because, we can't calculate this. You don't meet the income requirements, denied. Okay, so very important that you know this, know the need for a joint sponsor, know when it's necessary. I told you all about a case earlier, someone who just came to me to refile her case where she used a joint sponsor, but she didn't really need to. So just because a joint sponsor is available for people who are applying for this process, you need to know that you actually need it. And this is by checking your spouse's income, the household size, and then the required income for that household size. Okay. Yeah, and for this question as well, I'll just add, simply losing your job for a short period of time does not automatically disqualify you. Let's get that clear. Because it just really depends on how long your spouse has been without a job. Okay, so if they can still get their job back and it's not a permanent situation, maybe it'll be fine. But if it's a permanent situation, you need a joint sponsor. Okay? Thank you for participating. Okay. All right, Jashanti, I look forward to talking to you. Thank you. All right, let's get into the last question that I have right now on here. And let's see what this one's about before we wrap up for the day. Okay, the final question here is, about an approved I-130. So let's see what you need. After an approved I-130, do we need to submit proof of relationship again with the I-485 or include updated evidence to avoid an RFE? Great question. And the short answer is yes. You need to submit evidence of bona fide relationship at every stage of your application with USCIS, especially if you haven't been married for too long and you have a 2-year green card. Okay, because with a 2-year green card situation, there's always a question about whether this relationship is real and whether it's going to stand the test of time. So it's not a waste to send in updated evidence show more pictures, sending your I-130 approval notice, right? Because I've seen scenarios where people have been together for years, they were engaged, they did all that, they came in to the US, got married, and they were still lacking that evidence, even though they came in through the fiance visa route. They had already proven so many things over time, but life keeps happening. You might have a child, you need to add the birth certificate, your bank accounts, you're using it. So I always tell my clients to submit the most recent 3 months of their bank statements, because the one you submitted a year ago is already outdated. They need to know that you're still living life. It's always a need. Okay, so great question about evidence of bona fide relationship. It's always a need until you become a US citizen. Okay? So keep that in mind while you're going through this process, and make sure that you get connected with a professional if you're struggling, right? If you don't know me, if you've seen me for the first time, I'm a licensed attorney in Charlotte, North Carolina, but I can help you wherever you are. Okay, so thanks to the internet, thanks to video calls, we can talk about your case, come up with a strategy, and still represent you fully from the time that you start the process to when you get your decision. Okay? That type of support, I think, is unmatched with any other service that you're looking at right now, because some people focus on just the forms, right? They help you fill out the forms, get all the data correct, and you submit it. And then when an RFE comes up, or when there's a delay or something is happening, everyone's like, peace out. Ghosting. But we don't do that here. Okay, we're with you every step of the way. From my experience as an immigrant, it's helped me understand that most immigrants really just want a shoulder to rest on when things get tough, because things will get tough. That's really just the nature of being an immigrant in a strange country. So connecting yourself with like minds, people who want to progress, who want you to progress, who give you inspired information and not just scare tactics, right? When you align yourself with people like that, you begin to see positive results in your own life. So that's really my goal for my community, for all of you that I talk to. And this is why I'm going to come live every Friday, just to make sure we're connected. And if you have received anything from me, like a checklist or any email, maybe just subscribed to my community, you most likely get an email from me as well with updates telling you what's going on with us here at IFE Immigration Law Firm, all right? And how to stay connected, what to do when things are changing, how it affects you, all that good stuff, right? So I'm happy to be a resource to you all, happy to be here, happy to support you through what you're going through. And again, feel free to reach out for more support in this. And I'm going to make my final closing statements for today, and I'll see you all in my DMs, okay? So let me say this clearly. A green card denial does not mean that you're a bad person. It does not mean that your marriage is fake. And it does not mean that your dream is over. Okay, most denials happen because someone filed without strategy and they missed an RFE deadline. They didn't understand how to prove their relationships, and they didn't even know that they were inadmissible until it was too late. Okay? The truth is, immigration law is not forgiving. USCIS will call you out. They will deny you without warning. And if you don't have any strategy, you could really be facing that denial. So if you received a denial, you got an RFE and you're confused, and you have something in your past that makes you nervous, or maybe your spouse is no longer cooperating, March is going to be your month to take action. Okay. I'm opening up these strategy sessions for you all right now. Lots of people have already started to book. We're going to talk about motions to reopen, your marriage-based green card cases, your VAWA self-petitions, and also your I-601 waivers if you need it, so that you're not applying blindly, okay? Don't hope for a different result without changing your strategy. Book a consultation with me today. Let's review your denial notices and analyze your records and create a plan that actually addresses the problem. All right? Your future is too important for you to gamble. I hope you all are listening to me today and making a commitment for your future. So I want to see you in my calls next week, right? In this live next week, really taking charge of your future, right? Signing out, Attorney Ify, in this final live session for the end of the month. I wish you all a blessed day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.